without further ado, we're going to keep on with the presentations today. Colleen Marquis is the archivist at the University of Michigan-Flint. Their main focus for collecting and community outreach for the last 2 years has been on the topic of local music history. They also happen to be one of Detroit Sound Conservancy's very first volunteer interns when they were an undergraduate at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and when they lived in Detroit. I'm very proud to present them at this conference. Colleen, take it away.
Hi, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much, Carlton. Today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about preserving Flint musical heritage and how the community has really come together for this project. So I will share my screen. My presentation isn't as neat as the one we just saw, unfortunately. Let's see. Okay, and I am the archivist at the Genesee Historical Collections Center located in the Francis Wilson Thompson Library down here in downtown Flint. Okay, so Flint is a lot more than General Motors and Grand Funk Railroad. I don't know if everyone here knew this, but Grand Funk Railroad is from Flint, and we actually have still up the graffiti that Mark Varner and the rest of the band put up. It was actually only defaced this December and was immediately repainted up. So this is what people think of when they think of Flint, is General Motors and Grand Funk Railroad. Well, thankfully at my archive, we don't collect General Motors because they've got it covered. So I wanted to do a quick overview of Flint history, just real quick, that doesn't involve GM too much. So the first white settler that came here was in 1819, set up a trading post. This is, of course, originally the historic land of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. I want to recognize that we are having, I at least, am on native land, stolen land. And then after that, it was a lot of building of carriages, wool mills, and lumber furniture. You may have heard of Detroit as the Motor City. Well, we are called the Vehicle City because we started off so strongly in horse carriages. So then, of course, we move into auto manufacturing in the early 1900s. That is, of course, the industry that would take over Flint and eventually also give birth to the labor movement in the auto manufacturing industry. So the UAW was born here, just like General Motors was. 20th century in brief is that we were a one business town, as most people know, and then that business left. So we were a model town. The city had a top population of 250,000. It was one of the richest communities in America. And then starting in the 1970s, GM started moving factories. From 1970 through 1985, 1990, about 80,000 jobs left a community of about 250,000 people. So as you can imagine, it was devastating. Today, the poverty rate in Michigan is about 16.2%. Here in Flint, it's at about 30%. So we're a struggling community. But out of that struggling community, it comes a lot of music. This little thing I have at the side, the Buick, Chevy, Fisher, AC, those are examples of major factories. And when I say factories, they were about the size of several city blocks that had closed. So about the recordings collection at U of M. I started this job in 2018 and I took over from an archivist who had been here for 33 years. And one of the first things he showed me was the recordings collection. Now, the recording collection begins in the 1940s, mostly because there were no regional recording studios in Michigan at the time. Everything was on the coasts, basically. And with the invention and the improvement of taping technology, things began to change and we have regional things. The idea is to collect artists who are local, but also record locally. It's a very unique collection. It was donated in the 80s and from an anonymous donor, somebody who had collected all of this music. It goes from reel to reel all the way through CDs. We somehow skipped over 8 tracks, thank God. And the original mission was to collect the sound recordings of all these peoples in groups. And there's really nothing like it at any other library in Michigan. So what's great about the collection is that the music itself informs these different eras in Flint history. So we start the recording collection in the late 40s, early 50s, and that was when Flint music was country western crazy. So there's this guy named Forrest Green. You'll see him. He's the elderly fellow in this photo, and he's also the gentleman in the guitar. And he built one of the very first recording studios in Flint, and he built it in the front room of his house. That's how far the technology went in a short period of time. And he had some kind of recording studio in Flint all the way through the 1980s, when he eventually wasn't just doing country western, but was eventually doing other genres as well. He also had a open access television show where it was a variety hour in Detroit. And he's just in general a very interesting guy. But the reason why we had all this country western, because you don't think of Flint as a country western town, but you have to think of Flint as a migratory town. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, during the Great Depression especially, people from the South moved north, and they moved for the manufacturing jobs. What was great also is that during this time was also the Great Migration, where primarily Black Americans moved north. Flint became a Black city very, very quickly. And with the movement of these Southerners, we got country western. And with the movement of the Black Americans, we ended up with great rock and roll and blues music during this period. During this period also was a lot of polka and local ethnic music. The St. John's neighborhood here in Flint was heavily Hungarian and also Polish. There was a Ukrainian hall here. Just massive amounts of immigrants, again, coming for those manufacturing jobs. So a lot of the recordings in the collection, in the original collection, is of polka music or Ukrainian music, folk music. And then, of course, church recordings. The churches were very ahead of their times when it came to recording. They all have LPs. And it's obviously a lot of gospel, but what's interesting is that these churches do not exist anymore in a lot of cases. And the backs of them have photos of the congregants. So what's been interesting is I've indexed these congregants that have been identified, and family members have come in to find photographs of family members that they don't have photos of. So this collection keeps giving back in lots of different ways. Okay, so Flint music takes off in the 70s and 80s. So the 70s and 80s were really the golden age of Flint in general. The factories hadn't left quite yet. They were slowly moving out, but the nightlife in Flint was so intense. If you've ever been to Flint, there's a highway called Dort Highway. And now it's just littered with abandoned buildings going all the way down. It used to be bumper to bumper traffic because we were known so much for that nightlife. In addition to the top 40 bands, jazz acts, all of the kind of more dancey stuff, we developed a huge metal following with bands with names like Afterbirth, Ruthless Horde, Dissonance. Some other ones are like the Face Slashers, and one that was just called Gore. It was great. And then, of course, punk was very, very important in Flint. Guilty Bystanders, the 55Fers, and the Rugby Mothers were three of the biggest bands. And it was in the 70s that our Capitol Theater in downtown shut down and was bought by a private investor. Well, this private investor opened up the basement for shows, primarily punk and metal shows. This led to the development of grindcore here in Flint from a band called Repulsion. You can see them in the photos and their album Horrified. And it was a mix of metal and punk with a kind of lo-fi sound that had never been tried before. They were ahead of their time, and they're recognized in the punk and metal community as the first grindcore band. So that's one of our little claim to fame when it comes to hardcore music. And then the 90s, we had an explosion of rap music, and I want to specifically talk about MC Breed. Now, you may remember MC Breed's No Future in Your Frontin'. He was, it was a runaway hit, and he was the first commercially viable rapper to come out of the Midwest. He unfortunately died in 2017 in Ypsilanti. But before that, he would collaborate with Snoop Dogg, with the Dayton family, with all kinds of people. The Dayton family, not as famous unless you're from Flint. They have such a pull in Flint and did all their recording in Flint at small studios that popped up just to serve the rap, R&B, and like kind of Black music community, blues as well. They represent this independence in Black music in Flint that came about in the late 80s and 90s. We also had a lot of indie and alternative music. It wasn't as popular as the city became more and more African American. But things like Kid Cudi Collective and a couple of others that were really into soundscapes. Think Godspeed You Black Emperor, think like, yeah, stuff like that, heavy synths, things like that. And then we still have punk, so much punk here in Flint. We actually have Local 432, which is the oldest all ages venue in the country. And they do punk shows every day. It's their bread and butter. So still a lot of punk music here in Flint. And oops, shoot, I gotta go back one. How do I go back? Oh, well, what I wanted to say was what'll always be cool is the jazz in Flint. There's a lot of jazz recordings as well, but let me come out of this real quick so I can show you. Sorry about this. Okay, let's go back.
You got this, no worries.
Some worries. Okay, share screen. Let's go back to this. Okay, I really wanted to talk about the beating heart of Flint, which is the Golden Leaf Club. The Golden Leaf Jazz Club has been having jazz shows since 1921 continuously. And in addition to being the beating heart of Flint, it's also a memorial to the Black neighborhoods and communities that were destroyed by urban renewal. Much like in Detroit, we did some urban renewal stuff in the mid-60s, going into the 70s and 80s, where we decided that freeways were more important than Black neighborhoods and Black people. And this club is the last remnant of what was called the South Side or Floral Park neighborhood. And it stands as a testament to just the neighborhood that was there, the city within a city that was there, and how we can find some justice. It's also a really, really cool place. It's very small, very intimate. There's a photo right there of Sherwood P. He is a 90-year-old jazz musician from Flint, and he played there in some of in his early days. And then the symphony in Flint has been always incredibly popular and supported by the community, even during times of decline. The FSO has never had problems finding support. What's really interesting in this photo, you'll see the first chair violin is a lady named Alicia Byrd. Her father modernized the symphony and became the first professional conductor. He died during a concert in Wilson Park in downtown Flint, like during the concert. And it just brought so much more attention to the symphony, and they ended up being able to afford to put out records after Byrd died. There's still a wonderful youth competition called the William Byrd competition. So I wanted to point those out also as part of music in Flint. Let's see. And then the top 40s guys, again, we had a huge nightlife. So there's a lot of just working musicians, and we also had a musicians union. It was very, very interesting. And I'm working to preserve that history today. So how am I doing that? I'm doing a lot of digitization. The original collection that I'm adding to is all physical, as you would expect a collection from the mid 80s to be. But what I'm doing is digitizing everything new that comes in and returning physical items to the people who are giving them to me for preservation. And what this does is really open up a lot of avenues for collection. a lot of people, especially when it comes to local music, do not want to give up their memories, their pieces of this history. So being able to digitize them, still have them in the collection, and still be able to give those things back has been huge for collection. My outreach is aggressive. I've been described as aggressively friendly. And so I just grabbed the Forest Green was my first person, and the guy who connected me with him was a Freemason whose Mason's papers were coming to the archive. So I always try and link people together. And it's worked incredibly well. I've branched out. The collection has gone from just one person, the country western angle, to punk, the symphony, grindcore, all of it. The avalanche effect is all musicians in Flint know other musicians in Flint who want to talk about this, especially the old heads. What's also cool is we have independent radio programs here in Flint with collections of music. So while the collection that I inherited ended in the 80s, and there hasn't been any collection since, I am able to go to these radio shows like the Tom Sumner program, and the Kettering Independent Radio and collect more music that was left by acts in the past. So that's just exploded the collection as well. Other musical collections in the archive that I wanted to point out, the Bayarski Collection is a collection of folk music from the Thumb and Mid-Michigan. It's the only collection of this kind of folk music that exists in Michigan. And the Oral History Collections is another recorded collection, not musical collection, of all the oral histories of the sit-down strikers. So I just wanted to point those out as two other recorded collections that I'm kind of shepherding. So what's next? We do a lot of listening parties, so you get this music out there so people are listening to it again. We just did a punk listening party. We did a rap listening party on the anniversary of MC Breed's death, and we live stream these out from my office. And it's very low tech. I basically put my computer in a closet with a bunch of coats up to help the sound and turn on the record player. But it's been wildly popular at bringing people in to see the collection. So digital curation is another part of this. I've been working with Ann Arbor to build digital displays and digital collections that the University of Flint or University of Michigan-Flint might not have the capacity to host. So working with Ann Arbor has been incredibly important in that, and they support the history of Flint and especially my dog's about to bark, especially Flint music, just incredibly well. So more things that I'm doing is partnerships with the community archives of the Underground Music Archive, Take No Prisoners. If you want to check out Dissonance or Repulsion or any of the music I talked about today, that is the website to do it at. They also have flyers and photos, and we're working at moving their collection, which is now hosted on Internet Archive. We're moving that to the University of Michigan. I'm also working with Natasha Breed, that's MC Breed's wife, and she is, or his partner, and she is going to be donating a huge collection. I also mentioned the Tom Sumner show. So what my goal is with all of this is to add to the collection. I might not have made that clear at first. So the original collection stopped in 85, and I've been collecting music, but in addition to music is the oral history program and anything flat. So photos, flyers, concert posters, tickets, set lists. We're really creating a more robust and diverse collection around this idea of locally recorded and local artists music. And I want to thank you all for listening to me rush through that. I was way too fast, and I'd love to take any questions.
Colleen, fantastic work there.
Thank you.